Exciting mess. Sometimes it's a person. You see them in a movie and shout at the foolish characters who let the son or daughter of a devil mess up their lives over and over. You never know when you'll wind up on the screen. Loved ones turn into strangers and shout at you, and then laugh at themselves for shouting at fiction. When I was a kid, I had a cousin, a big sexy mess of a woman I followed like her pet paparazzi. My eyes were the huge flash dishes of Polaroid cameras. She counted on me for good press, fluff pieces of adoration. She did not mess up my life, probably because I was a kid. If she'd stuck around into my 20s, who knows? There's a parallel universe where she did. The citric smell of the furnace, the hypnotic exhalation of orange juice. Am I verbose? Is the superficial resemblance between verbose and verboten a hidden hint that verbose should be forbidden? It's impressive how Mike can let my words flow around him. He's the unmovable oak by which the flood judges its own speed and beams with pride. In one ear, out the other, it doesn't even make it into the first ear. Can I expect more from you? Oranges smell like welcome. What would George think if he knew I was looking for the priest in him, the callow Boston youth he left behind 60 years ago? Slices of fritillary fruit, sheerer than the most translucent sashimi, dew down on every shoot in the garden. I feel the plants tremble and hold, tremble and hold, tremble and break under the weight of this inhuman hunger freight. Real-life George never took vows. Poem George broke his vows like fists of raw spaghetti that, whole, would have resisted being shoved into boiling water. Like branches on the floor of a forest through which he ran and snuck on his way to something almost touching freedom. "I told you not to eat that," he said, as I choked on another butterfly. I already confess pretty much everything to George. I do it because he likes it, and I like him. If I find Father Ross in those shrinking blue eyes, or under that thinning glacier and glacier skin, will I confess the rest? Do I hope, despite my anti-clerical views, that telling him all will move something in the heaven I worked so hard to get rid of? Dream people, places, props, contrary to what we think, don't shift, they slip. Lemons smell snobbish. Or it's a species that depends on constant random mutations. A place, Warhol's factory, Suzanne's house, Julie's studio. Clutter that first fascinates and then oppresses. Or a movie, Houston's Beat the Devil, Cucor's Sylvia Scarlett. A Montessori field trip to the Field Museum. It's the sinking feeling an organized text could be about an exciting mess. Watching Executive Suite because David chose it for David, Karen, Liz, and Charlie movie night, Mike says, "You'd like that kind of thing, wouldn't you? Isn't it better to watch a movie alone? No one to distract you and make you talk a lot of bullshit, such as, did you notice the absence of usual elements creating a stark air? Or, a director could make a career out of movies like this. Every death, a rain of ripple-loving rocks into ponds of various sizes. That's just because you don't like people. That's just because your father said that. Because your mother believes untrue facts about you. Some you made up, some she did. Some were inherited. He's such a loner, he'll never marry." Febreze sprayed for company, in the car, mating with gasoline fumes, making an odd kid. I take out my old dollar bill face, press it into your palm, trying hard to believe it will, as you assure me it must, buy as much or as little as adolescent currency. "John said I don't care about you." John said, smirking, "I just care about peace." I said, "Can I live in the Dakota?" John said, "Is your name on the lease?" John said, "They are going to shoot me." John said, "I told you so." I said, "In your new apartment, all the sofas are whiter than blow." I guess I should ask real-life George why he joined the Peace Corps. I'd rather invent one reason for him and another for Poem George. I wanted to be a priest that wasn't a priest, and Costa Rica seemed the least expensive place to do this. I wanted to run from the church, like James Cagney running from the feds, like a bootless Schutzstaffel running from Nuremberg, or water running off a shed's roof. George Harrison said, "Pride can be modest." George Harrison said, "You're okay." George Harrison said, "Cancer will stab you, but even cancer passes away." Paul said, "La-di-da, la-di-da." Paul said, "I love your eyes." Paul said, "Whoop-de-doo. My private life wins first prize." Coca-Cola, like batteries, not like Sprite. I found a priest, and knew he was unrealized Father Ross, from the way he saw George, as though looking from a cross. He expected to find his mother, instead saw George in a Costa Rican man's arms, saw George filled with righteousness, fill the man with righteousness, fill the letter he sent his twin brother in Boston with righteousness that smelled like sweat and cum and bananas and whiskey and coffee, swimming for its life. Ringo said the money stuffed between the bottom of the snare drum and the snare wires ruined the drumming, but made the ruin worthwhile. George's twin brother read what could have been a Penthouse Forum letter, if Penthouse had been the official publication of the militant gays that were soon to haunt everyone's days. He dropped his music book, his theremin, his Catholic guilt, which had always felt like bangs, determined to block his view of his breviary. He dropped everything he didn't care about, and ran to the nearest gay bar, and pitched himself into gay life, as though pitching himself cock first off the bridge above true living. Fish sauce in all of Mike's stir-fries, a sauce I depend on, though I despise fish. You wake up and say you dreamed about your dad, but later it wasn't really your dad, and you were in a cinder block dorm room. But later it was the boiler room of the First Methodist Church in your hometown, where the mousy janitor smoked and steamed. You think your dad was following a plan when he changed into that other man, if indeed there ever was a man. You think the transformation of warm freshman bed to blazing furnace is the will of a particularly willful God. Nothing of the kind. As I said before, they don't shift, they slip. There was another man. He contrived to be from Japan. Or was I the contriver? He carried joints like loose change in his pocket. When homeless people asked for help, I was always afraid he mistakenly or knowingly would whip out that baggie in front of a cop or a meddlesome passerby. He eventually smoked himself down to a roach that he tossed into an iron refuse container on Santa Monica Pier. My husband's love was the survivor. They slip like discs in the backs of workers who insist on doing the twist on the workroom floor for the foreman. Overripe towels droop askew on dowel rods. George didn't become a priest. He became an amateur, a loving philosopher, an endearingly annoying Buddhist, a hobby horse versifier, an English teacher in the Boston public school system, an ESL teacher at Brandon College, which was founded as a charm school, but transformed itself when charm became obsolete. That's where I met him, and that's where I thought, if charm ever stages a comeback, and Brandon reverts to its original goal, George can be head charm master. It's not the relationship between a loaf of bread and the bag which tries to suffocate it, between bagged bread and supermarket shelf, between load and a bored buyer's grip, between slices and the cashier's even more bored grip, between sandwich stuff and the young bagger's handsome grip that makes me jealous of the bread, which with a masterful motion is now double-bagged. Was he stoned or naive when I shaved his head? When we sat on my bed, watching Kurosawa? When Children's Day dolls turned into displaced spirits of gorgeous peach trees? The Tico man's needs, his own needs, scared young George into a straight Tico marriage. My feet. There were other men. What they lacked in skill they made up for in pungency. What they lacked in cleanliness was amply compensated by enthusiasm, theirs and mine. Hundreds of sturdy balconies and not one tenant crazy enough to sit out in the cold. No one so desperate or so far past desperation they display themselves at the sliding glass doors. Squeamish, and I don't hide it. The reason I can be a poet but not a surgeon. The blood in poems is mercurochrome. George says gay men smell good. Women gut fish as though opening open secrets. They strip edible beasts of their fur and feathers. Pitying them for their shivering flesh, women warm the beasts over burning wood. Arm yourself for no good reason. Arm yourself against love or justice. Take your pick. Arm yourself against jasmine rice for the sake of your marriage. Leave yourself a little vulnerable to spice. Early November snow in Kenosha, which Suzanne's ex-husband, who lives 40 minutes away with his new wife and 3 sets of twins, calls Wisconsin's armpit. It has only one. We're happy and unhappy here. Madame Feu's star anise and cinnamon sticks. Cheek kisses are as brief and unexpected as a slap, as brief as a tap on a touch screen. Mike approaches from behind while I'm lowering dishes into the sink and thinking about the ocean's white foam on Vietnam and Laguna Beach, and dogs foaming at the mouth. Cheek kisses are always singular. Only children rapping the trees in front of their house with songs they make up. Songs any child psychologist could build a career on. They are steps on an out-of-order escalator. Notice that cheeks can't kiss back, and can give lips nothing but a spark. The kinship between cheek and brow kisses is cancelled by the cheek kisses' disregard for solemnity. Some cheek kisses are hopeless. Their attributes and disguises are extolled in one of Paul's letters. One of the best came from a regular hookup who I thought was just a hookup till the last time, before I moved away. He had put his clothes back on. I lay where we had finished. A surprise warm breath blew just above my jawline with the admonition to be happy. My cousin was behind me the first time I blew a one-armed, one-armpitted man at a party out of mutual pity. Varnish from cans. If you're talking about the Aldi 3 minutes of diagonal walking, or skipping if, like me, you're also gay in the old-fashioned way, from us, the baggers are the customers. If you mean the Piggly Wiggly catty corner from the library, there are, even in 2019, baggers, some of whom must be buggers. It's a fact of life. Ringo said they changed my name. Ringo said they'll change yours too. We filled this house with you and me and pictures I made. Once we fell behind on the mortgage. The bank came and took the pictures away. Later we fell behind again. The bank came and shooed us away. We found a place we could afford, and for 20 years we wondered what the pictures were doing, if they had new owners, and if they liked them. Remember, most movies never make it to the screen. We all give a reason, but none of us knows why we love Lady Day. Now that George is 80, his blue irises are turning white, and his big pearl eyeballs are shrinking, narrowing their focus, while his skin looks more and more like crepe dough. I'm starting to feel that he's my living ideal grandfather, though he's just 3 years older than Dad. Irish Spring. It started as sex, then turned into love. Thank goodness for mission creep. John and Paul said, "You never give me your money," but we know it was really just Paul. Twice now my employer didn't give me my money, the second time without a trace of apology. There are still men like my father who won't discuss their votes and who dig deep, wide moats around the subject of their fortune. Art, only the blues and their bastard son rock are up front. They're everywhere, those microbe thoughts that exercise their right to life on food we consider ours, thoughts about the selfish side of love, thoughts about our inheritance. They thrive cozily with our terror, yes, terror, of the day when we must sing, "Sometimes I feel like a motherless child," and scream, "Father, why have you forsaken me?" I don't see the beach ball, I hear its breath escaping. I hear crickets, as much a gift from Dad as the dog who absorbed the needle justifying its fear of the vet 30 years ago. The sound of the power lines is gentle in the wee hours. At bedtime, electricity vents its personality like the Furies. Sheets one of us finally got around to washing. A weird burglar breaks into our apartment. We're down the street at a quick trip, adding air to our winter tires. Me dropping quarters into the breathing machine that sounds like it has TB. Mike squatting, juggling the freezing pressure gauge and pump. The burglar notices the glasses, all styles, tortoise shell and powder blue, stationed all around the apartment like my mother's priggish coasters. A weird thought pops his window, wiggles over the sill and plops into his mind. A serial killer who has a fetish for guys who wear glasses lives here, and these are his trophies. He tries on a pair of black Woody Allen specs. He sees a swinger's pad James Garner rented in a 1960s flick. He slaps the glasses off his face as though they were a bug that banged into his nose bridge. He stands shaking till his breath slows. Then he tries a pink pair that show him the room he shared with his first real woman. Mike and I are driving back now. I'm talking about George and his Thai boyfriend. Mike, upset by their 40-year age gap, is trying not to listen. Usually this is easy. Not now. He's that upset, that disgusted. Mike mistrusts cheese but hungrily sniffs at durian. Stop eating that. I can't help it. Everything I eat these days gives me the hiccups. Stop hiccuping. I can't. Every time I hiccup, I suck food down my throat. Paul said tweet tweet. John took a sudden nap on the street. George said Ringo is nice. Ringo said you and I only live twice. A dish Mike cooks for breakfast once a week is tantamount to burning a full moon on the carpet. I saw the women from behind and thought, those loose coats, those profoundly un-Mexican caps, those gaits, Maria Cruz and Ana Terrazas. It was the long hall I don't expect to see students in. It was late and the floor was closing behind us. Is your husband wait? Maria asked, enjoying, I think, in a complex way, this simple question. They were heading toward a lot I didn't know about, steering from the back seat of the boat, warmed by the outboard motor. I thought, one of us, whoever is most mute, should live forever, and from time to time recall this long, senseless hall, and the vibrations we nudged gently, newspaper boats out and across the shiny white floor. I tried not to say disgusted. Commando pajamas that knows his mood makes good or bad. Detecting a smell from the kitchen, I realized. Rice announces itself with a light fragrance like whispered good news. This was the first moment I felt married. I wish he didn't feel that way. When I notice how stripped gray trees agree with the threat of rain, I wish I knew my cousin inside as well as outside. I wish I could explain. I wish explaining were as useful as loving. George moved to San Francisco to mine gold. He put it differently, though. Jimmy, his little twin, had sown there in the heyday of joy and was now sowing in the heyday of death. They signed up for every experiment, maybe the blood of the older twin, who had led and protected from hour one, could lead the virus like businessmen off a cliff. Maybe their hair burned in a cup by a powerful witch would help. Maybe saving Jimmy's life meant redefining life and saving. The smell of gasoline where it should and shouldn't be, the smell of bananas that says, don't eat me yet, eat me now, really, eat me now before it's too late. Mike patting cologne on his clothes at the door. He says it's a shield. I say it's one more gift to the world. Could police dogs sniff out my atripla? I renamed, for an obvious reason, the place where I keep scraps. The bank is henceforth the womb. Brains that contemplate the Ramanujan conjecture as though it were a harmless mandala, that grapple with Christianity and cast it off, that inhabit immigration's unabating ache, that learn compassion for addicts the hard way, debate when to put the Christmas tree up. Yes, George married a woman, enjoyed their bed for years, strutted as the pater familias, then ambled from dad hubby duties, as though exiting a diner in New Mexico on the way to Jimmy, his other who was not other, who ensured no one else was real to his brother. That kiss on my cheek on a Chicago street, marking me as almost real, was an honor. Maybe that was the aim of Iscariot's kiss. Tony Bennett, raising his arms as his crowd noisily welcomes him, is a surprisingly thick candle. He sings, "There are plenty of shamans who will say, 'Be still.' Hard to find one who says you are wise for fearing stillness. Our kiss in the friary changed our calling down to the last breath." He says he hates meat smell. I cannot smell what he's talking about. There's a sound he makes frying at the start of day, at the end of the poem, in the kitchen. It remakes the living room. It requires the ceiling fan and open windows. It's easy to see his retribution fantasies as water heater safety valves. A wine press. Put all you know on paper and you'll have early maps of the New World. Travel, settle, with and without the map, and you'll have a story. The nanny cams were Mike's precondition for letting repairmen in. He was right. No telling what they do alone. One took off his wet shoes. One, having replaced the filters, walked slowly from painting to painting, nodding and 2 or 3 times grunting, reading out loud the poems taped to the bathroom mirror. A text came in the middle of Bright Star. He read it in a glance and tucked it in his pouch. I like what regular tear baths do to my thoughts. The sin of pride is a fair price to pay. I disliked the blurriness, especially when reading, till he suggested tears are corrective lenses, a revolutionary focus smearing Nostradamus into stunning weather. I was beating rugs for the sake of the thud, the brief clouds, the harsh music of coughing. Musk and sleep, of course. What do you mean the usual analysis simply will not do in this case? I mean, she deserves a customized explanation. All through her publicly and my privately wild years, we worked on this. Her garden is all love apples and tomatoes spreading poison abundance. Paul said we all deserve customization. John said we deserve not to be explained. Mike says we deserve to stop when we want. For him, that will be when math and I end.